Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements. Hi, Sean.
How was your Thanksgiving?
You know, it was interesting. We went down to the old Pueblo, the Dirty Tea.
Right.
And I realized very quickly why I live in Phoenix now.
I'm not a huge fan of Tucson. Sorry, guys. Sorry,
I don't
Tucsonites.
want to bag on Tucson because the University of Arizona did beat the ASU Sun Devils that weekend, and not in decisive fashion by any stretch, barely. But you know, you just have to think that what Tucson could be, because it's so beautiful, the natural surroundings. And we stayed at Hacienda del Sol, and it was great, and that's a nice area. It's amazing place. But then you get down into the weeds. You go down past River Road, and you would think that with as much business, which is much they want to grow now, that they would clean up the town, that they would just put effort into that, and it just hasn't happened.
No,
it's sad, and it makes me. And then to hear business leaders who I was able to interact with on Thanksgiving Day, several of them just be lamenting about that they feel like it's getting worse. They feel like crime's getting worse, the blight's getting worse, everything's getting worse.
Yeah,
and then we live here in Phoenix, and I would say things are getting better overall from an economic development standpoint, but from an election standpoint, we might not be as happy.
Yeah, we were wrong.
You like that segue?
Yeah, that was a good segue.
Yeah,
we were wrong on a lot of things. Now, we were right. I think the only thing I got right was that we were going to have a 6-3 delegation, Republican delegation,
barely,
which happened. We did not get as many legislative seats as I had anticipated. We didn't get as many House seats in U.S. Congress as I had anticipated.
No.
We did not win the Senate.
No,
as I had thought we would.
In fact, I don't think we're going to win Georgia. I don't think the Republicans.
No, I kind of feel like that's I
think that's done.
The interesting thing to watch will be, and the next episode we're going to have Rich Tao on, and he is going to talk to us about Georgia because he did a focus group right after the election.
Well, and he called Pennsylvania almost completely.
I mean, he's going to be able to educate us a lot.
Well, we're going to be eating crow the next couple podcasts. We're going to have Rich Tao on.
And Simon.
And then we're going to have Simon Rosenberg from NDN on. He's going to really tell us how wrong we were.
Yeah, because he was the one who was saying there was no red wave, and I was saying, no, there is. And I was wrong.
He gets to come on and gloat. And that's the fun of politics. I mean, listen, it's a game, it's a contact sport, and you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Dynamics change, especially like we've talked about the last 2 weeks of the election, and certainly we saw that in the election results. Dynamics definitely changed. Independents, for the most part, voted independently. And you saw that in the results in Arizona.
Yeah, and what they did is they acted. They did act independently.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, if you look at polling, a lot of people are going to have, continue to have discussions about polling. I think, for whatever reason, polling actually tended to, over inflate the Republican performance. And I think at the end of the day, candidates matter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately what happened, was that the candidates, and the best example I can use is when people say, oh, Arizona's gone blue. No, it hasn't. Because if you look at what I would consider kind of the baseline Republican performance, it's Kimberly Yee for state treasurer.
Yeah, you've said that before.
She wasn't MAGA. She wasn't a Trumpite. She just ran a traditional Republican campaign. And there wasn't a lot of profile on it. It wasn't a very, there wasn't a lot of noise about the campaign. It was pretty much just like, okay, she's got an R by her name. She got 56% of the vote.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we talked about this before about the idea of competence, right?
Yeah, and you compare
she's
that.
She's proven herself to be competent.
Well, and it's there was a factor that if you were a Trumpy, they're just a subset of Republicans and independents that voted against you.
Well, the last stat that I saw with regard to Carrie Lake was like 9 to 10% of Republicans did not vote for her.
Right.
And you had a huge swath of the business community absolutely not support her at all. And those numbers, that became apparent those last 2 weeks of the election. And I had several discussions, and I didn't talk about it openly on this show, with people who had run in the primaries and other people within the business community, and nobody was coming out for her because she had actually said some derogatory things, against McCain Republicans.
Yes.
And then against the business community, saying that she didn't need Doug Ducey's people.
Yeah.
And there were a couple just really rookie mistakes. I don't want to pick on Carrie, but that were made in those last 2 weeks, and specifically in that campaign. She was leading for most of the race after the primary season. She probably was the better candidate overall versus Katie Hobbs. But she made some errors within those last 2 weeks that just showed how inexperienced she was in terms of reaching out to the broader electorate.
Well, she just got into the echo chamber of thinking that if I hold rallies, I've
With
got a lot
Steve
of support.
Bannon and Charlie
Yeah,
Kirk 2 weeks before the election.
No, the weekend before.
Well, the weekend, but it's in that window.
Yeah.
And in that window, like we've talked about before, you really need to focus on those independent voters. You need to focus on broadening your base and not out of the echo chamber. And if you don't have what I've called the three-legged stool of conservative politics, and it's what this show is based on: faith, freedom, free enterprise. You need to get those faith voters to turn out who are really concerned about where the country's going from just a traditional family values perspective, and that includes Christians, Jews, Muslims, whomever. The freedom people. She had the freedom people. You have to get the activist class to turn out. But the last part that she was missing was the free enterprise piece. Mm-hmm. And the chamber kind of sat out of that race. Other groups were told not to participate, by the campaign. And that's the piece that you need to get you over the hump.
Yeah, she ran a campaign of exclusion, not inclusion.
Well,
She was basically saying,
that's a perfect way of saying
she
it.
was basically saying, if you're a McCain supporter, I don't want your vote.
Which is nuts.
Which is crazy.
Which is nuts.
And
we can all go back and forth about issues with John McCain and whatever, but the one thing about the McCain voter that was very, you had really committed Republicans, pro-military, pro-national defense Republicans, and then you had a lot of conservative Democrats who voted for McCain no matter what.
Yeah.
All the time. And
Right.
you could have brought those people over.
Yeah, it just seemed crazy to me that there was so much of an exclusionary message. Ronald Reagan was a great president, but he was a great communicator, great message guy. But he was one who always viewed half a loaf is better than no loaf.
Well, he had the Reagan 80-20 rule.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. If we agree with each other on 80% of the stuff,
I'm not going to worry about the 20%. If I
because
can get
it's more than the 100% I'm going to disagree with the Democrat.
If I can get 80% of what I want on a piece of legislation, don't try to thread the needle with the other 20.
Right, and that's the same with campaigning. Campaign to the broadest audience you can, and so this was a loss by Carrie Lake, not a win by Katie Hobbs.
Yeah, I agree.
And as we sit today, Maricopa County is certified. I think all the counties except for a couple. Maybe Cochise hasn't.
Cochise is still an issue.
And there's going to be legal challenges. Hamadeh filed a lawsuit. It got thrown out because it was too soon. You can only do that after the certification. And so Carrie Lake will sue about the chaos that was ensued on Election Day.
What's your viewpoint on that?
I think we have
Obviously,
to go back
it's not going to change anything.
No. I think we need to go back to precinct-based voting rather than vote center voting, because I think, it creates too many potential problems.
Yeah.
I also think that we need to we need to follow Florida's example, and on early ballots have to arrive like the Friday by 7 p.m. before Election Day to be counted, because the drop off of the ballots on Election Day is why it takes so long to get these results completed. Just need to
Well, the
speed
other
that
thing that
process
Florida
up.
does too is they start counting immediately. They don't wait till all the ballots are flowing in. They begin counting.
Yeah,
once,
they count as they go.
as they go.
Yeah.
And so on
I think-
Election Day, they're
I
able
think
to
we do
report
that.
their results immediately.
I think we do that here.
I don't think so, but you might be right.
We must do something, because the first ballot drop. I mean, the first results we see at 8 o'clock on election night was ballots that were sent in and received by Friday or whatever. So I think we need some election reform for sure. Interestingly, voters narrowly defeated the requirement to have voter ID for mail-in ballots. In fact, the
and
margin
that's going to come back.
the margin on that is basically the same as the margin of loss on that is the same as the margin of loss on Kari Lake, 17,000 votes. So as we said,
Isn't it amazing? She lost by 17,000
yeah,
votes.
that's what I'm saying. The exclusion. I mean, the campaign of exclusion just didn't work out.
Well, what she's going to be, proclaiming or claiming at this point is the idea that people were disenfranchised because they weren't able to vote on Election Day, and that equates to however many thousands that she thinks that might be.
Look, everybody had a chance to vote. They may have not liked the way that it worked out. I mean, my own daughter went and had the problem with the ballot not being tabulated, and she put her ballot in the door 3. That's the process.
Yeah, and eventually got counted.
Yeah. And so, they're going to battle this out on the legal front. It's not going to change the results. The only one that where there could be a potential change is in this AG's race, because there's only 510 votes that separate. You don't want to talk about, that's the closest statewide race I think we've ever had in history of Arizona. 510 votes
Yeah,
out of more than 2 million cast.
yeah.
That's amazing. Some stuff about this election that I find interesting is that there are, so I have been for the last few years been watching carefully the dynamic of people who vote a ballot but leave races unvoted. Like in 2016, there were 90,000 people in Arizona that voted a ballot that left the president line blank. 90,000. And then in 2020, it was 60,000 that did that.
I'm sure more leave the judges line blank.
Oh, yeah. but you talk about the president.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
No, I get what you're
it's
saying.
amazing. So in the governor's race, there were more than 30,000 people who left that line blank.
Well, there you go.
Problem for Kari. So those
Yeah.
are people who
Who are like, I don't like either
Clearly.
one of them.
were probably right-leaning and said, I can't vote for Hobbs, but I can't vote for Lake, so I'm just going to sit this one out.
Yeah, I
The other
know some
thing-
of the sadly, I know some of those people.
Yeah. So
I know a lot of those people. Some of those people might be in my household because neither one of those women were resonating in my household.
Yeah. So and then in the Senate race, now this wouldn't make the difference in the outcome, but the Senate race, there were 73,000 people who abstained from voting in the Senate race,
Yeah.
which is remarkable.
That is incredible.
That's a huge number.
Well, we know that Blake Masters now that everyone's unpeeling everything, that he just was not a compelling candidate. He was very, very green.
Oh, he was compelling.
He was compelling
compelling and
people
turning
against
people
him.
off.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of getting people to vote for him, he didn't give a lot of people a reason to vote for him. It was all about Mark Kelly and why you should vote against Mark Kelly.
Yeah, the problem.
And then what Blake said during the primary and before just came up to.
Those are the things. The things that he had said and written about and made videos about
Yeah.
prior to his running. Then some of the early stuff he did in the election campaign came back to bite him. The part of what Republicans need to figure out, and this is at a national level, is in a state like Arizona where we have a fairly late primary.
Yeah.
If you've got a Democrat who does not have a primary opponent, like Mark Kelly didn't, it's kind of up to the national committees and the people who do the outside spending to come in and do some negative defining of the Democrat prior to the Republicans figuring out who their nominee is. Because once the Republicans have gone through the battle of that, then they're already behind the 8 ball. I mean, Kelly was able to spend 18 months, propping himself up. And the moment that Masters got the nomination, and even before, I think Kelly might have come out hitting Masters even before the primary because he anticipated he'd win. Masters comes out of the primary and he's just getting hammered.
Oh, completely.
And there's no defense because he's spent all his money in the primary, and the outside guys didn't see it as a possibility. And apparently, according to Stephen Law at American Crossroads, and the head of the Senate Conservative Fund, the focus group data on Masters was he was the lowest performing Senate candidate they'd ever seen, even worse than Roy Moore.
Yeah. That's why none of that money came in. They saw early on that it would be a waste of money, and it turned out to be right.
So we'll wait and see. So there will be a recount.
Let's talk about one other race, and that's our good friend David Schweiker.
Yeah, he won.
Barely.
It was close.
So what's your assessment there?
Well, I mean, it was the redistricting made that
Much more
district much more
competitive.
competitive, and there was probably some downstream effect of the people who didn't like what Kerry Lake and Blake Masters were selling on the big Trump stuff. And even though David didn't lead with the Trump stuff, he was endorsed by Trump.
Yeah, you had some outside groups that were pushing that.
Yeah. So, I think that, it'll be interesting to see what happens next cycle when it's presidential election year. Turnout's going to be bigger. That's the other thing that's interesting about this turnout was, I anticipated turnout was going to be higher than 2018, but that wasn't the case. It was 2% lower. It was 62.5%, not 64.5%.
That had a
in 2018.
Do you think that all the talk of a red wave, all the hubris around that, kind of depressed the Republican vote?
I don't know.
A little bit.
I think what depressed the Republican vote was that we had crappy candidates talking about election denying.
Looking towards
people
the past
were just
versus
tired of
being
it.
aspirational.
Yeah, I mean,
towards the future.
they're like, and people, they say, oh, people were disenfranchised because the news reports were talking about these problems at the polling places. Well, you know what? If you haven't gotten somebody motivated enough to say, yeah, I'm willing to go stand in line, that's on you.
Or motivated enough to request an early ballot and send
right.
it in early. Well, the interesting thing about the Schweiker race is that I texted you this. I ran into his opponent at a dinner party, Jevin Hodge. Super nice guy.
I'm sure he is.
And he's agreed to come on the podcast.
Oh, there you go.
So we might have some fun with that.
Yeah.
In the new year.
That'd be good.
Get his perspective on, he took it to the mat.
He came close.
Came very, very close.
I mean, within 3,000, 3,100 votes.
Came very, very close. It'd be interesting to hear his perspective.
Yeah. So, so the delegation goes from 5-4 Democrat to 6-3 Republican,
Which is the best news of as a conservative, the best
great.
news. and Juan Ciscomani won.
Yeah.
And he's going to do an amazing job for. We were joking about Tucson before, but that's one of the bright spots that I think, in terms of the issues that are happening down there, he's
Yeah.
going to be able to try to tackle as a congressman, and try to offer a balancing viewpoint to the socialist, the overriding socialist viewpoint in the old Pueblo.
Well, and it'll be interesting. So we've got a
his
Republican.
protégés.
Yeah, we've got a Republican legislature. It's again 31-16. 31 Republicans in the House and 16 in the Senate. And
How do you think that plays out in the new year?
with the
new
Democrat governor,
Just
it's
good old-fashioned gridlock.
good old-fashioned gridlock, just like it's going to be in D.C. with Democrat president, Republican House, with a very narrow majority, and a Senate that's basically tied. And maybe it'll be 51-49. Maybe it'll be 50-50. I don't know.
Yeah,
The question
we'll know
is,
by next week.
Yeah, and the question, and we'll pose this question to Rich next week or on the next episode. If somehow Herschel Walker wins Georgia and it is 50-50, what does Joe Manchin do? Because he's up for re-election next cycle.
Well, you have
2024.
quite a few up for re-election next cycle.
Yeah,
that are looking at the polling data, regardless.
But there's none of the other Democrats are in any, I think, of remotely possible would they switch. And I'm not sure that Manchin would switch to Republican. But
he's not likely to get
West
reelected.
Virginia is a very, very Republican
Yeah,
state.
he's not likely to get reelected at
Yeah.
this point.
Well, I don't think so. So we'll see.
We'll see how he votes going forward.
Yeah, and we'll be back with that next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. God
See ya.
bless.